Well, it's finally time to focus on those April 2nd tariffs, isn't it? Now, will Trump tariffs be bigger and more disruptive than commonly believed? That's a big question. To be able to answer that question, we need answers to a few questions, answers that we don't have right now with us. Let me try and explain. I mean, all we can do at this point is actually put them up as questions. 4 questions to be precise about the April 2nd tariff announcement, 36 hours away. The first is simple: timing. There is still no clarity on whether Trump will use tariff law requiring a mandatory review period. That is one, or instead use emergency powers that allow tariffs to take effect immediately. Like, for example, the case of auto tariffs, there was no review period. They came into effect immediately. There is also the potential for tariffs to be phased in. So, for example, if he wants to impose 20%, in some cases 10 now, 10 over a period of time. If it is done like that in a phased manner, it should actually take off some of the sting from the initial announcement, so as to speak, from a market standpoint. I mean, it will be seen as negotiating. The second question is size. Not long ago, the consensus worst case scenario was a universal tariff near 10%, with China tariffs specifically being higher. These estimates, consensus expectations rather, have risen. I mean, they stand at between 15 to 25% for many countries, depending on who you ask. And very few carve-outs are being expected by market participants, at least, when they are announced initially in the first round. Third, there is the question of which countries are impacted. Recently, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent mentioned a list of the, and I quote, quote-unquote, dirty 15. He didn't name countries, but the EU, Switzerland, Japan, South Korea and India are likely included on the list, along with, of course, Canada and Mexico, where there is already tariffs which have been imposed. The likely 15, this set, would make up some 80% of US imports. Finally is the question of how other countries would respond. Again, I mean, a few months ago, earlier this year, the consensus view was that other countries would use restraint in their response to Trump tariffs. Can we be sure of that now? I mean, unlikely. Many countries are openly saying they plan to retaliate, impose retaliatory tariffs. And of course, as we've seen in the case of Canada, I mean, it's also maybe a vote getter, standing up to Trump and sounding like you're not afraid. Now, these are, 4 of the big reasons. There are more, but these are the main 4 reasons which basically are causing enormous amount of uncertainty around what is coming next, and the shape and size and the way it's going to be conducted and implemented. We'll know, of course, in the next 36 hours, like I said. Now, let's just focus on India and the potential impact. Now, here I'm using calculations from JP Morgan economists. The tariff differential between what India imposes on US goods coming here and US imposes on Indian goods going into the US is 8% on a weighted average tariff basis. So if it is reciprocal, it should be 8% on a weighted average basis. But JP Morgan points out, and others like Neil Kant and Sunil Kaul of Goldman Sachs have also pointed out, that that number rises substantially, that 8% number, if the Trump administration decides to include the VAT figure of 18%. Now, the GDP estimate, according to JP Morgan economists, is 20 basis points if it's simply the weighted average tariff, and that number can rise to 50 basis points if it actually is weighted average tariffs plus VAT. If you can sort of, that's essentially what I'm talking about. Now let's go on to the table, which will tell you sector-wise implications as far as the tariffs are concerned. Very, very simple. Exports to US as a percentage of India GDP, tariffs imposed by US on India, tariffs imposed by India on the US. So it's to make sense of this, simply put, the way to do this is take the tariff imposed by India minus the tariff imposed by the US. That's a differential on a weighted average basis. And of course, you consider the exports to US as well in terms of how meaningful it is in terms of sizable contribution to Indian GDP. And in that sense, the 3 sectors which come to mind here are chemicals and pharma. There is textiles and clothing, and agri and meat products. These are the 3 sectors which kind of satisfy that criterion, which could face a substantial and sizable hit. These numbers are also from a JP Morgan report. Now, of course, the question then, of course, having said all of this, lots of unknowns, some knowns in terms of the data itself, the question for markets near term is this: will US liberation race, as Trump has been phrasing the 2nd of April, be another risk shock? Can it cause more downside, or will it be a bit of a clearing event, a hump to be crossed with greener pastures ahead? It's been exhausting for markets to trade and chase these Trump headlines all along. But finally, and thank God, and I don't know if I should say thank God, but we don't have to wait very long to find out. Back to you.
informed decisions with comprehensive analysis on the go.
Strengthen your portfolio with real-time market updates on the go. Create effective strategies with insightful expert opinions on the go.
Grow on the go with CNBC-TV18, now streaming live 24/7 on YouTube.
Thanks for tuning in to CNBC TV 18, and for more news and updates, follow us on all the social media platforms.